Congress passed it July 3rd. Trump promised it would be historic. Depending on where you stand, it might be, for better or for worse. The final version totals $1.2 trillion, with major implications on everything from energy policy, childcare, tariffs, border enforcement. Where do we net out here, Amy?
I mean, the border enforcement is what I think people are most excited about overall. There were many mandates that Trump ran on during this election. He wanted to fix the economy, so obviously that's where some of the tax cuts come in. You know, he ran on fixing our issue with illegal immigration, and he has done a tremendous job of that so far. And I don't want to take that away from him, and the provisions in the bill to strengthen that are wonderful. But like I've mentioned time and time again, this is the issue when you don't have these single issue bills and you lump so much inside of them that people will say, okay, I'm okay with this purely on this ground, and they're able to just let it slip that there may be terrible long-term repercussions. And the way that I see it is we've traded some short-term tax relief for long-term solvency of this country.
Oh, 100%.
And, you know, and that's why Democrats and Republicans alike have been opposed to it. We saw that it was a party line vote with J.D. Vance actually coming in to give the tiebreaker. The people who voted against it were Susan Collins, Tom Tillis, and Rand Paul. Now, I do have a video of some of the Republicans speaking out about it. Now, some of these people actually did end up voting for it, but I just want to show you some of the concerns that they had voiced prior to this being passed.
What the Senate did is unconscionable. What they did to our bill was unconscionable. I'll vote against it here, and I'll vote against it on the floor.
You're going to hear a lot about the tax cuts, but the deficit, nobody's talking about the deficit. Nobody. I got it. The tax cuts are important. We are going to get the tax cuts done in some fashion. But we cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with an exploding national debt.
Do I like this bill? No.
Right.
I tried to
That's what I mean. They ended up voting. And so did
of
Lisa.
Alaska's
She ended up voting
interests.
for it
But I
too.
know.
Although,
Oh my God, don't even get me things, though, started that really on bother Lisa. you guys, because I've watched a host of different people, like Charlie Kirk, and it's like, okay, there's no tax on tips, there's no tax on overtime for cops. There, you know, we're putting $1,000 in every baby born now into the S&P 100, so when they're 18, they got a savings account. Like, what do you
So here's the issue. They
wanna really
analyzed this over a period of a decade. And so the issue is that a lot of the tax relief and these things that are going to cost a lot more money are happening in the short term, reinstating the 2017 tax cuts, the child credits, etc.
But it would be catastrophic, though.
But but they're saying over a 10-year period, it's going to be deficit neutral because the cuts that are going to come in are going to counterbalance it in the long term, such as the cuts to Medicaid, many of which don't even start taking effect until like 2026 and even
beyond. Medicaid are work requirements, right?
Yes, and that's all it is, work requirements. Now, there was a point being made where they wanted to remove all illegal immigrants off Medicaid. Now, technically, they don't qualify, but there are state programs which
there are
allocate
in California.
Other blue
didn't
states.
they just end that like last week? Newsom literally just ended it, but look, it added a pretty significant financial strain on the state. We had to borrow a lot of money because undocumented individuals, of which, by the way, there are many in California, were qualified to receive Medicaid, which I think there is a good argument for that in regard to how expensive it is when someone just ends up in an emergency room. Like, preventative care actually keeps costs down. However, you got to kind of take a look at this bill, like the whole bill on its own. Trump made the same argument in 2017. Oh, these tax cuts, which disproportionately do benefit the richest people in the country, the best, like the most profitable corporations, they're going to create jobs, and it's going to create so much economic opportunity, it'll pay for itself. But that is not what happened. There has also been analysis done to see if these corporations who got a fat tax break actually created more jobs. They didn't. A lot of them engaged in mergers and acquisitions and got rid of a bunch of jobs.
Right.
And then with this bill, look, I'm just going to keep it 100.
I still don't see what you guys hate so much.
Okay, so like
Hold on. Let me say one sentence.
No, please. I'm seriously asking. Like, what do we really hate?
We're spending $1 trillion already a year to service our debt. this adds to our debt. Every analysis.
The tax cuts, you're saying.
The tax cuts and the spending, because it allocates more money for defense, by the way. I think it was $150 billion in additional spending on defense.
Okay.
Additional spending on the border, right? So there's a lot more spending and less revenue.
And less cuts.
But less revenue
the cuts. Here's the
because
thing.
of the cuts in taxes.
And the cuts, how can they bind a future Congress to these cuts? There is no way for them to bind them. So in another 4 years, when Trump is out of office, we're just going to keep kicking this can down the road. And then our children and our children's children and our children's children's children are going to have to deal with it.
They're already talking about a mega bill in the fall. They're doing another one. This is a disaster from a financial point of view.
It sure is.
I'm trying to give Trump. Hold on, let me.
Many conservatives. Because when I hear
because
this argument of like
the ring.
work requirements
that's unfortunately
for Medicaid, yes.
I'm a huge proponent of fiscal responsibility. This is devastating for our national debt. This is an additional $3.4 trillion on top of $33 trillion of our debt. And you and I, we are paying for that, my friends.
More than defense at this point. Defense spending is like about it's going to be $1 trillion soon.
Let me tell you why this impacts the everyday American. It's not just about national debt. Everyone's interest rates go up. If the federal government's interest rates go up, and what does that mean? You pay more for your house, you pay more for your car, and don't even get me started on what we had to do to get Lisa Murkowski on board.
Right.
We had to bribe her with $1 billion for random shit in Alaska to get her vote. She didn't want to come on board, so we were just throwing random stuff like at her, for fishers, for fish, like things that you have no idea. These esoteric, uniquely Alaska, this basically pork.
It's pork.
To bribe her to get her to vote. It just completely. And I do have to diverge with Ann a little bit on here. I hate to do that, but I really feel like work requirements are a good thing, and it's something that
too. Like I'm waiting to see, and I hear everything you're
saying.
Hold
on, can I just say they cut $1.1 trillion for Medicaid. They cut up. So the Medicaid system is robbed of $1 trillion. The work requirement argument is total bullshit. It's not about work requirements.
Explain it to me.
They're getting less funding. So it doesn't matter if you work or not, even if you qualify. If there isn't enough funding for you to, get Medicaid and you're like living in poverty, you're not going to get Medicaid. They don't have an additional 1.1 trillion
than just work requirements.
They're worried about rural hospitals shutting down.
Okay, that is a completely different. So that is a piece that I have yet to hear. I've heard work requirements, work requirements, work requirements.
Let's talk about
this thing is so big, it's almost impossible to follow. I'm like, wait, we're doing AI regulation? No, we're not doing. We're funding abortion. We're not funding abortion.
We are.
There's tax cuts.
So
there's not. It is almost impossible.
Wait, couple of white pills because I have been super negative on this segment. I like that they stripped Mike Lee's national parks provision. They're not going to sell off the national parks.
Oh, yes, that's right.
That is a good thing.
That's because of the parliamentarian, by the way.
Yeah. I do like that they have defunded Planned Parenthood. That is only for 1 year, though. I was hoping that we'd see a lot more defunding because, as we've covered on previous segments, they are not being responsible in the way they are distributing care. They are transing minors without doctor's notes, without any oversight. Right. I do understand that they serve a purpose, but I think they're grossly misappropriating what their bans are.
But on one hand, and I hear you, and I'm sorry, but on one hand, it's like, we're adding all this money. We cut Medicare. We cut Medicaid. It's like, but can you have it all? That's kind of the part where it's like we're adding all this money to the bottom line and the deficit and but they cut this and they cut that. So is it the allocation?
It's the whole thing. It adds to the debt. I have a huge problem with the fact that we're nickel and diming the American people on things like health care, which people desperatly need.
So you want that money to health care, not defense.
By the way, there's no debate at all about we're just going to add an additional $150 billion in defense spending, something that we already spend close to $1 trillion a year on anyway.
Well, politicians get paid to do that because
of the defense contractors and everything.
That's very that. I'm like, I hear you. I understand.
So this is the way I see it.
These
it
concrete
takes
things
from the poor to give to the rich. That's the best way to frame this bill. That's what it does. By the way, let me just put all my cards out on the table. I'm going to get a tax cut. A nice, sweet tax break.
Everyone's happy about that.
So I should celebrate, right? Except, no, I don't want to celebrate because me getting a little bit of extra money in my pocket isn't going to benefit my life as much as it would to see my fellow Americans get the health care they need to live healthy lives. Okay? And there's no debate about us just paying for bombs for other countries, sending more weapons to foreign countries for their wars that American taxpayers fund, but we're going to nickel and dime the American people on healthcare?
Well, unfortunately,
unfortunately, your point though,
ladies,
these are the points that are not honestly coming across in a way that's clear, with people really leaning into, I like this thing that we're giving babies. I'm like, well, that's cool. I like work requirements. Okay, yeah. I don't want to fund her abortion. Okay. But like, I really, honest to God, don't feel like someone has said exactly, I don't like that we're giving all this money to defense instead of healthcare.
Well,
because it's like, you see what I'm saying?
It's just the balancing of the budget and the timeline of it, right? Because again, all of the relief and the benefits are in the short term.
Yeah.
And like, anybody knows when you're setting any worthwhile goal, even on a smaller scale, let alone running a freaking nation, the most powerful nation in the world, shouldn't you have a little bit of foresight to how this is going to affect future generations? It is good for us right now. So let me ask you a question. What do you think would be better, us to get the short-term tax relief now, or deal with this can that we're kicking down the road?
Guys, this is wait, hold on, guys.
Hold on. Sorry, my bad.
Thank you. Well, a lot has happened since I last. So, to Anna's point, I actually agree with you 100% on this, because we are the United States of Lockheed Martin.
I know.
That's what it is.
I do know that. This is, you got me on this one. I'm with you here.
Unfortunately, the military-industrial complex, 70 years later, after Dwight D. Eisenhower's warning, we are still falling prey to its siren call, unfortunately. So that's number one. And by the way, Amy, I loved your point about how in the immediate term, the short-term stuff, it's all good, but the long-term stuff is bad. And it's perfectly timed. It wasn't a coincidence. And the reason why is they want to get through the midterms, and Republicans want to retain control of the House.
That's what I'm saying. There's no way they will survive that if you do not do the tax cuts. So it's like you're asking for an ideal world.
Yeah, but they're looking at it over a 10-year period, and that's what they did last time as well, where they look at it over a 10-year period, because that's how the grading system works. It comes out deficit neutral. But the only thing that is guaranteed right now is we're going to increase spending.
Right.
Nothing is guaranteed on these cuts because we cannot bind a future Congress to those. So it sounds good. It is simply optics.
We are on a very dangerous trajectory. And I do want to say, on this, I have to diverge from you a little bit. I just have to be, stay true. But like, instead of freaking out about the work requirements, can we get specific about what they are? Because we haven't. Let's enumerate. It's 80 hours a month, and you don't have. It's
I know.
But
by the way,
I know you're not understanding my point, though. You're not understanding my point. It's one thing to be like, we're going to implement work requirements. By the way, we've done this before. It's failed, but whatever. We're going to do it again. It's going to fail again. Let's just go through the process. But it's not that. I just think the work requirement argument is total BS, because they've preemptively cut $1.1 trillion to the Medicaid system. That means the Medicaid system already is robbed of $1.1 trillion in funding. So even if everyone who's currently getting Medicaid actually qualifies for Medicaid under the work requirement, well, what happens if the system has been robbed of $1.1 trillion?
Well, this is like dozens of billions of dollars that we've trillions of dollars that we've dedicated in Medicaid. But I do want to say, it's kind of, from my point of view, it's an insult to the American people to think that they can't fill out a form twice a year.
It's an insult to the American people when we're funding fucking bombs for Israel or for Ukraine, but we can't afford fucking health care for the poor in our own country.
I don't think that we should be paying
I hate this argument. It's
I don't think we should be paying for illegal immigrants. I just don't think.
No, but what are our priorities? What are our priorities? But keeping Americans healthy, even if they're living in poverty, or sending bombs to foreign countries?
You make a great point there. However, I think with regard to the work requirements, it's a question of...
It's total bullshit.
I hear you, but the bigger thing for someone like myself is, hey guys, we got to take agency here.
Okay,
exactly.
So, and it's beyond just relying on the dole.
Yes.
In other words,
amen.
Do we have data? Like, does anyone on this panel who's like, we need to have work requirements? We need to have work requirements.
I'm not saying work requirements.
Do you guys have data showing that there's a bunch of bums in America who like refuse to work?
There's
okay, what is it? Tell me what the data is.
Wait, let me first just take a broader step. It's a good thing to give people dignity. It's when did we?
What's the data? Because I've looked at the data. What's the data?
You're suggesting they won't do the work?
You're saying that every single
everyone who's in favor of the work requirements has this assumption that able-bodied Americans who are on Medicaid are just lazy bums.
Are you saying that literally every single person is entitled to Medicaid?
This has been analyzed a billion times.
Are you saying that
every
100%?
able-bodied person who's receiving Medicaid, who is not taking care of dependents and can't work because of that, they're qualified because they're already working.
You're saying
there's over 60% who are able-bodied and they are working.
Yes,
we can look it up right now.
Somebody look it up. Please.
So explain this to me. If I'm able-bodied, why am I not working? Then you're saying there's no jobs for them?
My point is, able-bodied people who are getting Medicaid are working. They're all working
unless they have a dependent.
Unless they're taking care of elderly family members.
But they qualify, though.
Yes, that's the point. Okay, everyone, focus. Okay. Yes, they qualify. So the argument is they're working, so they qualify. So what's the big deal? They robbed Medicaid of $1.1 trillion. The whole system has a lot less money to function.
First of all, guys, there are
hold on. Are we arguing work requirements, though? Because you're saying they're working.
Overall,
I feel like we're conflating different issues. All right. Do we need to continue litigating this? You guys all hate this. I'm giving it a little more time to play out.
I just want to say that we are talking about, like, we're on many different tracks right now.
Right.
Can we all agree that it's not a good idea to have illegal immigrants on Medicaid? Can we just, is that something that we can establish rapport on?
I know your argument, because I've seen Gavin Newsom make that case in debates. But my thing would be, how about no illegal immigration then? I would go kind of back to reform immigration.
And you know what? We have had this conversation before, Anna, where we talk about like socialized programs that are available to people. And the reason why in Nordic countries it's not such a drain on the system is because they don't funnel it through to illegal immigrants.
Immigration.
Exactly. Yes, and if we had a similar functioning system, then I think that program would be so much more effective. So
that's fair. That's fair. And you're right. You know, Scandinavian countries, and I've looked into this personally, have incredibly strict immigration policies, far more strict than the United States, if you can believe it. And it's because they have a robust, you know, social safety net, public programs that people pay into, and they don't want it to be unfair where people come in illegally and they take advantage of those programs. But again, I just want to go back to the point that it does, even if let's just put, this is the hypothetical. Every single person who's currently getting Medicaid right now would still qualify after this bill passes. They would all qualify. They're all doing the work,
regardless,
whatever.
There's money gone to bombs.
But hold on, forget about the bombs.
Okay.
Everyone who's currently getting Medicaid would qualify even after the passage of this bill.
Got it.
What happens to them when the system has been cut to the tune of $1.1 trillion?
That's a very generous assumption, though, that everyone would qualify. Like, I find that hard to believe.
There is analysis on this. There's data on this.
For example, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, even said that there are a ton of able-bodied people.
Okay, so we're okay with people not getting Medicaid because we've made an assumption.
I believe
we've made an assumption that they're all lazy bums who refuse to work.
I believe in American people, and why are we in this welfare mentality? What happened to personal responsibility and just
because we live in a country where we have fewer jobs, and more importantly, fewer and fewer well-paying
open jobs. Though.
Hold on. Fewer and fewer well-paying full-time jobs with benefits. More and more people are relying on a bunch of temporary jobs, like they cobble it together, or a bunch of part-time jobs that they cobble together. It's funny because we have all of these different thoughts that conflict with one another, and we never connect the dots. So for instance, on one hand, we talk about AI and how it's going to rob people of their jobs, and that's already happening. In fact, the very industry, Silicon Valley, is impacted the most at the moment as a result of AI. A bunch of people losing their jobs. Okay, fine. Bunch of jobs have been offshored to foreign countries because, corporations want to exploit cheap labor rather than pay American workers a living wage.
Yes.
All of this stuff is happening at the same time in our economy, and yet we're just going to chalk Medicaid recipients up to lazy bums who refuse to work.
But Anna, there's 7.8 million unfilled job openings.
What kind of jobs are those, though?
Okay, let's say.
When you break it down, they're mostly part-time jobs or temporary construction jobs.
Part-time job.
I know, but I want you to look up the data.
And by the way, it's not even just work.
I want you to look up the data in regard to how many current Medicaid recipients are working. How many aren't working?
Lose their benefits,
and I believe that it's also
like
disproportionate.
I'm gonna lose my mind. mind. If they cut $1 trillion from the system, they're fucked. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I get it, but then, oh my God, do you actually have an issue with job requirements?
You know what? Fuck it. You know, just let them fucking die. Who cares,
hold
right?
on. You're assuming that the entire program is $1 trillion.
Who cares?
Medicaid is a multi-trillion-dollar program. $1 trillion isn't going to decimate the program. That's a false.
All right, we'll see what happens.
And again, I just want to
really
say that I have strong faith in the American people that they don't constantly have to rely on welfare to have a meaningful life. Like, when did we get into this very toxic mentality that we had to depend on the government?
Lindy,
for
you live in a bubble. You don't know what it's like
Growing
to live
up
in poverty.
You
don't
literally
know
know
what it's like.
I literally
You're sitting here on a set feeling real good about yourself, looking down your nose at people who need Medicaid. It's ridiculous.
I grew up in poverty.
All right, let's do this.
I grew up in tenement housing.
I feel like I'm speaking to a wall. Let's just move on.
Let's
just move on. We're not.
I just want to apologize to all the
on.
Americans who are going to suffer as a result of this bill.
Right, but you
and
don't.
the
In the
added
meantime, you don't
defamatory
have to.
conversation about them being lazy bums on top of it.
And
but anyway,
No one is saying
lazy
that.
bums.
We're trying to give
We're
people
saying
a
there's
moment.
8 million jobs.
Exactly.
If you're able-bodied, let's fill them. Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.